This is the sermon for the 24th Sunday after Pentecost, and our gospel reading for today is taken from the 19th chapter of the Gospel according to St. Luke, reading verses 1 through 10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So Zacchaeus hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." Today's gospel presents to us a wonderful story filled with numerous details to ponder and explore. The incident of its placement in the lectionary is one of the times when we can truly appreciate the ingenuity of the lectionary. Last week we heard about Jesus telling a story of a tax collector who, by the understanding of his own place before a gracious and forgiving God, becomes aware of salvation. And this week we have the story of Jesus' actual encounter with a tax collector. As I mentioned, the story is filled with details, and given the economical nature of biblical language, whenever we encounter a detail, it should serve as a kind of exclamation point for us, an indicator that something here is important. So let's see what the details given to us by the authors of Luke's Gospel can tell us. First of all, we see that Jesus encounters Zacchaeus in Jericho, where we presently learn that Zacchaeus has a house. Now, Jericho is a city of considerable trade wealth where a tax collector could readily become rich, and to be sure, our text does describe Zacchaeus as being rich. We also, of course, learn the man's name, which is in fact somewhat unusual in a narrative peopled by characters often only known as a certain man or a woman from such and such town. So it might be important to note that the name Zacchaeus is a Hellenized version of the Hebrew Zakal, which means pure or one who is pure. When a child is given a name in the Jewish faith, frequently that name is a promise of what the child will grow up to be, or at least what the child's parents might have hoped for that child. Undoubtedly, Zacchaeus' parents might have been less than impressed with the way that promise turned out, for as we've mentioned in previous sermons, the tax collectors were seen by their Jewish countrymen in a most unfavorable light, seen as traitors to faith, and what's more, as downright criminals, taking even above and beyond the already burdensome taxes imposed by the occupying government of Rome. Now we also learn that Zacchaeus wants to see Jesus. He wants to see who he is. And he wants that strongly enough that he is willing to put himself in a most undignified position, that of climbing a tree so he can see beyond the gathered crowds. By the way, we are also told that Zacchaeus is short. We might, in a different context, interpret the language of the text to alternatively mean that Zacchaeus is short in moral stature or lacking a certain maturity. But the fact that the authors of Luke make a fairly big deal over the fact that Zacchaeus cannot see past the crowds leads us to the simplest interpretation. He's just short. So he climbs the sycamore tree to see Jesus, and when Jesus passes by, he calls him by name, ordering him down, ordering him to take him home. The phrase used in the Greek text is in fact much more of a command than an invitation, the tone being similar to that of a parent. "Zach, you get down here for dinner right now." One could almost add, "or else," to complete the emotional impact. Well, despite the tone of Jesus' command, Zacchaeus seems only too happy to comply. He makes haste to come down the tree and begins to make a statement very much unlike what we expect of a tax collector. He tells Jesus, "I will give away half of my possessions and restore anything I might have stolen fourfold." Was he sincere in that? Did he react that way because he heard the grumblings of the crowd calling him a sinner? Did he eventually do what he said he would? Perhaps. But we can't know because it seems that Jesus almost brushes past Zacchaeus' promise, doing what Jesus always does, going one better, or perhaps 1,000 better, or 1,000,000 better. Jesus informs Zacchaeus of the salvation that is coming to his house. One can almost imagine the people in the gathered multitude watching, mouths hanging low, tongues almost wagging as Jesus walks off with Zacchaeus to dine in the home of the notorious sinner, who, after all, as the text tells us, is also the child of Abraham. And here I'll ask what I ask almost every week. What does this mean for us? Sure, it's a great story of redemption, but really, what does this have to do with us? Now, there are many ways to interpret this, and I suppose as long as one is mindful of the context, there may be many valid ways to exegete this story. So here is one way. The way I believe the Holy Spirit has been speaking to me this week, and I pray the way the Holy Spirit might speak to you as well. Zacchaeus, I believe, may be taken as a metaphor for us. Well, not just us, not even just the church, although it might be taken that way too, but the way I have been led to look at this, Zacchaeus in many ways represents the whole family of man. Let me explain. In the eyes of his countrymen, Zacchaeus' foremost crime is that he has forsaken his first love, his cultural heritage, his nation, and his God in favor of his personal gain. And that, after all, is a situation the world finds itself in. In the words of Isaiah, we all like sheep have gone astray. Or as Paul says, writing to the church in Rome, no one does good, not even one. So too we have left our first love, our Creator, our best and heavenly friend, in favor of the gods of our own making. That may be nowhere more evident than in the church. What part of forgiveness do we not understand? What part of turn the other cheek do we not get? What part of my kingdom is not of this world is really all that hard to comprehend? And yet, Not unlike Zacchaeus, we sit in our marble churches, congratulate ourselves, singing the praises of great men, even while we have blood on our hands. And like Zacchaeus, for all our accomplishments, we are small of stature. The more we learn about the universe, the smaller we realize we are. A speck of dust blown about on the edge of a swirling cloud of 100 billion other specks of dust. Thousands of years of history behind us, hundreds of thousands of years of being human, and we are just now scraping the surface of what we think we understand, even as scientists tell us we could be mere moments away from the final consuming nuclear hellfire of our own devising. And like Zacchaeus, living in the uncomfortable dialectic tension between our perceived successes and our inherent smallness, and the accusations of a world that is only too aware of our failings, we know something is missing. We long for something, and sometimes we will reach for it, shove through the crowds and climb sycamore trees for it. Perhaps that is what the world's religious obsession is about. The religious, almost religious insanity that plagues humanity. We fight wars and execute people over religion. We immolate ourselves, mutilate our children's bodies, and stunt their sacred imaginations. We study and translate, argue, convene, convocate, and assassinate, all searching for something. Higher and higher in the tree we climb, maybe all of it, Christian and Muslim, Jew, Hindu, New Age, Old Age, astrology, astral projection, drug-induced visions, and the plastic Jesus on the dashboard of the pickup truck with a gun rack in the back are all about looking to find something. And then Jesus calls us by name. Sometimes it's harsh grace, but it's always grace. Sometimes, maybe more often than not, Jesus catches us off guard. Yes, he lifts us up like the woman about to be stoned, possibly by her father and her brothers and her uncles. Sometimes he orders us to get up and walk like the man at the pool of Bethsaida. More often than not, he tells us, like Zacchaeus, to come on down, because the only place we're going to meet him is face to face on the ground level. Where will you meet Jesus today, or this week? It is, of course, a question between yourself and God. But I'm pretty certain it won't happen if you have elevated yourself above your fellow humans, if you've built yourself up, filled your life with your own sense of importance, then it will indeed be very difficult to meet Jesus. Just as it is for religion to truly meet Jesus. So long as we in the church, or any religion for that matter, continue to cling to the top branches of our sycamore trees, while so much of the world grovels in the dust, we cannot meet Jesus. But when we do finally hear his voice, calling us, demanding of us that we let him into our homes and into our lives, take him home and break bread with him, that's when the change stirs in our hearts, where what was crooked is rendered straight, where what was previously so important is brought low, and what seemed so very far off is found within our grasp. That is where we realize we are all Abraham's children, God's children. And yes, salvation is coming to each of us.